Are you ready?
Yes, and I'm very excited.
This is the major thing that stopped laundry in the past from being able to be scaled.
At any point within that year, you could be sued.
For anyone who was watching my face, I went through a lot there. That was a roller coaster of good stuff. Welcome to those who haven't been here before. This is going to be fun. This is the feedback loop. With a round of applause, shall we welcome founder number one? For everybody, what is your name?
Hi, I'm Alice Shao, and I am CEO and co-founder of VitaLabs.
Alice, you're going to have a minute to tell everybody what you're building. Then we're going to talk about what you're building, maybe some feedback. Are you ready?
Yes, and I'm very excited.
Awesome. I'm excited to tell us, what are you building?
So once upon a time, I was diagnosed with IBS, and it was a long and complicated process to figure out what kind of nutrition, diet, and supplement program would work for me. And in my research, I found that I'm not alone. 200 million Americans suffer from some sort of chronic illness, most of which are preventable through proper nutrition. The problem, though, is that our healthcare system is broken. The average wait time to see a provider is 3 weeks long. There are thousands of different diet programs and supplements you can choose from, and there's no accountability toward results. So that's why my co-founder and I decided to build VitaLabs, which is a precision nutrition co-pilot. It helps you and your provider keep track of your health goals, progress, and metrics. It's a shareable program. It works with everybody to make your health faster, easier, more accessible, and more affordable.
Awesome. Just under a minute. Good job. Okay, so let's talk about what's really interesting and what I think you illustrated well, and then I have questions that we can clarify. So I think the fundamental problem set that you're talking about, a lot of people can empathize with. You laid out both that personal experience and also, I think, as you're talking about the rest of the stats that you brought up, no one's going to be surprised, and so you set up a good world there. I'm less certain on exactly the touch and feel of what you're building, so let's get into that a little bit. I think that's where the pitch can really improve. So talk about what the product literally looks like.
It's a great question. So right now we have a consumer-facing platform that allows you to do a really quick intake process. We capture biomarkers through your blood data. We give you a supplement recommendation, which we've custom formulated in-house.
And that blood data is coming from a test that you're giving them or that you're...
Right now, it's through providers like Quest, so third-party partnerships.
And that partnership means that you can trigger the request for a blood test.
Exactly.
Cool. Can someone bring a test they've already done and kind of not have to do it again?
Yes. So initial intake, our ICP already has blood tests on hand from 3 to 6 months ago, just the nature of their conditions. So we can capture that data pretty easily. Our unique proprietary system actually intakes that and calculates exactly where your optimal level should be. And to answer more of your question, we do want to keep track of progress over time. That's the accountability factor. So we do request our customers get retested every 2 to 3 months.
So then what's the experience, over that longer term time horizon? As a user, am I actively, imagining that there's a lot that you can decide to do, and there's this, concept of an ICP where you can decide, okay, people with sharp chronic problems, as in it's spiking in their life and they want to deal with it. Those users, you can get them to do anything. I'm curious more about like that broader user base or that long-term vision. Do you imagine this is something where you are driving a lot of behavior change for people, or are you a companion that sits alongside their provider? Are you deciding to be their AI nutritionist and doctor? How do you think about, because again, I can imagine once you have blood tests, biomarker data, all of that information, it's up to you how deep of a product you want to build.
Mm-hmm, totally. Well, we want to democratize biohealth data. You have the power to, if you have your own biomarkers, to change your life the way you want. So it is a co-pilot for both your doctor and you, depending on what your individualized path is. But our vision is really something that's flexible, that can work in your everyday life with some sort of 24/7 on-demand coaching, in-platform communication with your doctor, et cetera.
How rapid of a feedback loop, not to name the show, but how rapid of a feedback loop can the recommendations or changes that you recommend based off biomarker data be? In other words, I can imagine that you can very granularly tell me what to do today or tomorrow if you had enough data. Obviously, you're somewhat limited by the frequency at which I'm going to update my data and my biomarkers. Or you could say that these are lifestyle changes that might take a week or 3 weeks for me to implement. What's the variance in terms of the set of recommendations that you expect to give? Are they fast recommendations, frequent recommendations?
They are long-term recommendations over the course of months. And one thing that I do want to point out is that our competitors right now, a lot of them will take data that's unnecessary, such as stool samples, and your microbiome changes from day to day, and that's not a really good long-term indicator of where your health's at. So we are in the long-term health business. So we recommend different courses of treatment depending on where you are. We have currently a 4-course supplement treatment that if you come in with a specific issue, such as gut health issues, we progress you along those.
Some subset of investors you speak to, customers, partners, et cetera, will wonder about like the efficacy of the supplement stuff in particular. I'm somebody who maybe comes a little more skeptical of supplements as treatment. However, there's probably a huge variance in terms of like deterministically, these supplements are good for these sorts of chronic illnesses. And I would agree with that. The data would prove it versus maybe there's more anecdata, more stuff that's experimental or dependent on the person themselves. When you think about my objection, I'll actually hand it to you that vague. Address me as a person who comes a little bit more like, I love the top of funnel. You're going to identify biomarkers. You're going to allow people to see their data. You're going to be able to help them get, let's call it more traditional solutions to their problem, or at least analyze how they're changing over time. The supplement side of it, how big of a business is that for you? And then how would you address kind of my skeptical brain?
Sure. Yeah. That's one of our biggest questions. So thank you for asking. It is interesting because if you're a cynic about it, technically the efficacy of our nutrition supplements and diet changes could be separate from the actual demand for our product. The supplement market is growing at 10% year over year, double digits. But in terms of efficacy, what we want to do is we want to be the voice of science and technology in the industry. There is so much fly by night right now. We want to actually conduct a third-party clinical trial that we're trying to do in 2025 to prove efficacy, bring that back to insurers actually and employers so that it's paid for by insurance so that we can bring it to more people.
It's really interesting. So what's coming to mind for me, there's a founder who, another one of my shows, 3-Course Founders, where I talk to folks who are a little further along in their journey. I talked to a couple weeks ago and met a couple months ago who I'm really fascinated by. His name's Kian. He's founder of Nucleus, which is a genomics testing company, but he also has machinations of building an AI doctor. And the reason I'm bringing him up, a lot of the themes that you're talking about, I think also are true for his business. And I'd encourage both of you, actually, it's even feedback for him, to think more about the agnostic versions of your product or the agnostic philosophies of your product, and then the subjective versions, and try to weave your pitch accordingly. What I mean, the agnostic versions are the stuff that everybody would agree. It's like shared truths of this is going to be valuable, it's scientific, it's clearly good for the consumers and their providers and everyone in the ecosystem. So that's the tracking. That's the idea that it's companion over time, tracking data over time. No one can object to that, right? I find that valuable no matter what. Then there's the portion where we get into the subjective side, where you can be a little bit more broad in terms of what you say you enable and have a few different paths. Because, for example, I am fascinated by how much data you're going to get. And so you're almost running across demographics, tons of little A/B tests where you can go back to users and say, actually, we've seen, here's how biomarkers are changing according to supplements, according to behavior, according to other methods of prescription or solutioning, intervention, versus stuff that you say, hey, we're just giving you all this data. And then we have a store. You're the one driving your own purchasing decisions as a consumer out of the store. And again, it'd be interesting to hear that pitch almost separate those two concepts so that I don't have to buy the entire thing as an investor, where I go, great, I may or may not love some of the business model. And again, I don't know how big of a business model or how intertwined those need to be. But if they do need to be intertwined, again, separating them allows me to understand those value propositions differently. And one of the examples of how Kian's handling it too, because again, this data is really interesting. He was tweeting at some people who were talking about how there's apparently a subset of the population that only needs 4 to 6 hours of sleep versus the rest. And he said, and maybe the thing that was being discussed was research that this is genetic. And he goes, great. I have all these genome tests from all of our users. If you think you're one of these individuals, DM me. He was going to send them free tests, and suddenly he was going to run not a study in the traditional sense of a study, but he was going to run an analysis on all of this user data and essentially provide value to the users that we otherwise wouldn't get anywhere else, right? Your platform could be a way that users run again all these A/B tests, and we can't really do that right now other than talking to each other in Facebook groups.
Yeah, you've gotten to the crux of the issue. And one example that I want to point out is 23andMe for personalized health insights really never took off for many reasons. One of which was they were trying to use their database to fuel drug discovery, which is decades-long research. And so they never got to see that money back. But we're focused on consumer-side nutrition, which has a much faster timescale. The other thing is 23andMe had a one-time, I don't know if you've ever done it, but you do a one-time, I think you pay $200 to get your ancestry and wellness insights. It's not a recurring revenue model versus our platform is coaching and it also has a physical supplement, which is D2C.
Yeah. I think this is the biggest thing, to wrap things up here with like pitch feedback overall, finding a way to talk about all the parts of the journey, because I think we uncovered a lot that I didn't necessarily get from that minute pitch, right? So there's the tracking, there's the triggering or prescription of that test in general, there's the overtime coaching, there's the ability to sell products or interventions directly to the consumer. And so you'll usually have more than a minute, obviously, so you have a little more time. But even in a minute, finding a way to give that narrative where you're going through, the heater really agrees with me, where you're going through and you wind up mentioning all of those parts of the journey, I think will be really useful, because again, then an investor or even a recruit or even a customer can decide which part of that value chain do they appreciate and want to latch onto, and which sounds like either dressing or tests or experiments that they're going to be along on the ride for. Because again, for me, let's say as an investor, I'm going to be most excited by what you're talking about in terms of consumer enablement. The solutioning, the interventioning, I don't know, right? I'd be like, I want to see over time what that looks like, how valuable can direct interventions that we recommend be to the user. But by its nature, the idea of essentially creating a consumer platform that is returning value through this shared data pool is super interesting. So find that narrative and find the way to weave between all of them. But it's super interesting. Good job. Thanks for sharing.
All right. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. I think, again, this is one of those pitches, and it reminds me of Kian at Nucleus, and they've raised like $30 million and they're further along on their journey. But even he still struggles to talk about all of these parts separately. It's like, okay, we're a genomics testing company. We can send you the kit. We're going to test 100% of your DNA, unlike 23andMe. That's his basic core pitch. But then the rest of what he imagines the future looking like is we're an AI doctor. Unlike anybody else, we're going to have this genome kit, but then we're going to ask you to give all of your other health data over time. What else are you getting in terms of blood tests? What else are symptoms you're getting over time as an individual out in the world? And how can you collect all of this data? And again, this really interesting part is, what does that data return as insights that for the first time we're getting outside of the context of, let's say, a RCT, a randomized controlled trial, or a study that a university or hospital has to run? These platforms can essentially do something, if they have the scale, that would otherwise require a lot of funding and a lot of time to do in the form of a professional or an official study. And so again, that narrative though, right, you have to weave between the different value propositions we're talking about here. And so for a founder with a lot of those pieces, it's on you to figure that part out. Do I have a founder? Awesome. With a round of applause, let's welcome founder number 2. What's your name again once more?
Dan Feliciano.
Dan, you're going to have a minute to tell us what you're building and then get some feedback. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Awesome. Tell us, what are you building?
All right. Well, once upon a time, my mom used to tell me, don't get in the back of a stranger's car. And now 150 million people get into strangers' cars every single year. I'm Dan Feliciano. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Clotheslyne. And Clotheslyne is a Techstars portfolio company that's revolutionizing the way that 65 million families in small and medium-sized markets are trusting strangers with their laundry. And we're doing that by rolling up the 50 million residential laundry machines in the United States into the largest laundry outsourcing company in the world. Over the last 2 years, we launched our app-based marketplace in upstate New York. We've grown throughout the Northeast, We have 10,000 customers and 1,000 service providers. Last year, we did 38,000 loads of laundry, and we saved our customers about 60,000 hours of time that they didn't have to spend doing laundry, that they could do other things like come to a pitch show, meet you.
Awesome. That's a minute. Good job.
Thanks.
For anyone who was watching my face, I went through a lot there. That was a roller coaster of good stuff. I mean, we discovered a lot of interesting things I have a lot of questions about. I'm going to start with a piece of feedback that I think I just want to get out of the way before I forget it. I don't like how you began because it took so long to realize what you were building. And then you also gave me too many nuggets along the way to the point where I especially think about someone who isn't as actively listening as I was, because obviously I want to very actively listen in this moment. But the idea of you being a laundry product, I think, took maybe 15, 20 seconds to get to. And then the idea of it being people's homes was a connection that you had me make, which is delightful, right? You said something that made me realize, oh, what you're doing is essentially some version of Airbnb or Uber for laundry, but it's like, I have questions again on the logistics, but my laundry is somehow getting done at your house. But too much of, you did it well to the point again where it worked on me. I wonder how much of the crowd it worked on or a viewer at home it worked on where they're like, I'm still not sure after that minute exactly what you're building. So despite the fact you did that well, I wouldn't recommend using that methodology of storytelling for an initial pitch because it takes too long to join you on the journey. But fascinating. I am also a New Yorker who's used Folded and other at-home laundry services, so I feel like I'm an audience member or potential customer in your demographic. Let me start with the questions that are more logistics, and let's get them out of the way. So it's what I described, right? It's like, I get to do my laundry at your home.
Absolutely. I would, if I was your laundry provider, your clothesliner, I would pick up your laundry. I'd bring it back to my house. I'd do it at my house, and I'd bring it back to your house and drop it off.
The provider is all in one, as in you're the transport, you're the person who has the laundry machine, you're returning it back to me.
Correct.
Not to get too in the weeds, but let me ask it because again, it's on my mind. Does it have to be all in one?
Yeah, well, the reason why it works all in one is because you eliminate a lot of the fluff that's caused some of our previous laundry startups to fail, right? Once you start introducing different facets, laundry doesn't have enough money in the product that you can start outsourcing things. Once you start outsourcing things, people are like, I'm not going to pay that much.
I would be surprised though that like transportation, for example, isn't better optimized if you were routing between, let's say, so this is a marketplace, right?
Yeah.
And so again, actually, just for the sake of everybody, including those who are watching on YouTube later, to make sure we're all on the same page, your product is, I sign up as a consumer, I'm matched to a provider, a launderer.
You get to choose your provider. That's a major difference between our service and so
why do I want to choose?
You want to choose because this is the major thing that stopped laundry in the past from being able to be scaled, is that laundry is insanely intimate to most people. Like the idea of a stranger
really
seeing your laundry is very difficult for a lot of people. And so we've challenge that by allowing you to create a relationship.
Just because I want to finish my thought, then give you feedback on this. So, again, I as a person, I'm going to sign up. I'm going to get matched to a laundry.
Yeah,
clothesliner. Then we're going to set some cadence. Maybe the first time is one off, and you're going to come to my house. I'm going to have it in a bag. Yep. You're going to take the bag from me. You take it home. You wash my laundry, and then you bring it back at a scheduled drop off.
Correct.
I'm paying per pound.
You're paying per bag.
Per bag. Okay, interesting. And then you're taking a cut, and then the clothesliner keeps the rest.
Correct.
Okay, we're on the same page. Now let me give you feedback on this thing that you just did. I'd think carefully as you pitch investors about this. Have you raised money yet?
Yes.
How much?
Almost $1 million.
Okay, awesome. Congratulations.
Thanks.
When you're pitching new investors, what things might they object to that takes them out of their excitement? Yeah. So for example, you just said that thing about like the reason this hasn't scaled is intimacy, and it was a reaction to me saying, oh, and it was you bringing up that you could pick your clothesliner.
Yeah.
Hide those facts towards later in the conversation because I don't like either of those statements. Now, you might educate me, especially if we're in our second or third meeting, and you're going to tell me why picking the clothesliner is so important. You're going to prove to me that intimacy is actually the reason and not logistics that these products haven't scaled. But I have those objections right now, and they're not important to you winning me over, right?
Yeah.
So you've brought up and it's hard as a founder to realize which of these things are like the accidental trap statements because you're like, this is me giving you value and talking about that product. But you'll learn about it through experiences pitching people where like, I don't like those two things. You still in meeting 3 probably would get away with telling me about them, and then we get into the weeds.
Yeah.
But earlier on, hide some of the things that might be disagreeable.
All right, that's great.
Now where I want to go. Let's go back to the pitch overall.
Okay.
I loved, again, even though I don't want you to pitch it this way, this whole idea of like taking all the residential laundry units and, monetizing them in this way. Why, though, is that more cost effective versus a version of Clotheslyne or you as a founder saying, okay, we're going to use all the laundromats in a city and do what has probably been tried before. So I know that like there's some evidence of this not working. I don't know why, but maybe we'll get into the weeds on that. It's interesting that you're doing it this way, but I don't know why you're doing it this way. Tell us.
Yeah, so we're doing it like that because the laundromats that you see in Manhattan don't exist in the rest of the country.
Okay.
And so if you ever really want to scale laundry outsourcing, you have to find another way. There's only 12,000 laundromats in the whole country. 30% of them are in New York, LA, and Chicago. The rest of the country doesn't have access to laundry outsourcing until you start to monetize.
That's like a fun fact that like makes a lot of sense once I thought about it for a second. But when you first said it, I like these sorts of things as a founder. It's like a little delightful thing where I was like, only 12,000? And then I go back to what you said. It makes sense. Not everyone's New York or Chicago or wherever else. Okay, you're bringing laundry into someone else's home. What's weird about that? What's hard about that from a perspective of stuff you haven't solved yet? In other words, it's intimate. I get it.
Yeah.
Is it hygienic? How do you protect against damage? How do you protect against damage to someone's laundry machine, to their clothes? What's the surroundings that you have to ensure quality assurance, essentially?
Yes, all that, right?
Yeah.
So all that. We're startups, so we're working our way through all of those things. What we found is 95% of our orders go without a hitch. Like we have a customer service department. At the end of the day, it's maybe 10 orders out of the hundreds that we did that day have an issue. And it usually comes down to something like that. Oh, it wasn't folded correctly or it wasn't picked up the right way. And so a lot of that comes down to how do you manage quality control across 800 different individuals doing laundry. And so you try to build in programs, right? You try to build in a training program at the beginning. We have feedback loops that are both Yeah, that are both like outward facing, everybody gets a 5-star, but then internal as well, right? So that the clothesliner doesn't get to see it, but we get to see behavioral aspects of different clothesliners so that we can understand what works best, what doesn't work best, and try to implement
it's a real Uberification.
Yeah, it really is.
What can't I get done? I assume dry cleaning, obviously.
Cleaning, yeah.
Is that the only thing? Like hand washing?
Yeah, you can get hand washing, you can get ironing, you can get it all done. And that was one of the real reasons why we thought that this individual kind of concierge service was so great, because you're working with a person like this. So think of it like your housekeeper, right? The first time your housekeeper comes to your house, it's the housekeeper. The next time it's Maria. And the third time you're like, hey, Maria, can you do this for me? And she's like, sure, I can do that, right? I can wash the dishes or I can put the kids' clothes away. And that's what it's like with our individuals, right? They create a relationship with these people. We have an 80% retainage rate because after the first order, they're like, hey, this is our person.
Isn't the value prop of a marketplace like yours that I don't care who's doing the fulfillment, and over time that person can switch? Over time, that person can be someone closer to me?
Yeah, so I think that that's a misunderstanding about the value prop of marketplaces, right? So, if you look at Rover, which is $1 billion, like they only allow you to choose people and you have to talk to them before you actually hire them. And they do that because some things require you to get to know somebody else. Taking care of a dog is like that. I feel like that's
so true with pets in a way that... let me ask you this question, founder to founder. Are you convinced that you have to do that this way?
No, absolutely. And we don't do it for all orders. So like a 24-hour order, it's just not enough time.
So again,
and so we have
pitch feedback.
Yeah.
I would tell people how you're doing it today while actually yourself admitting or revealing that you can also do it this other way. Because I do think marketplaces benefit from the ability to have very elastic versions of fulfilling supply and doing fulfillment. I do think also that brought up for me this idea of like, you said, oh, you're going to establish this relationship where it can improve over time, but I actually want the clothesliner the first time to be better at understanding how to do my laundry than me. That'd be a value prop is like, I hate looking through my shirts and going, which of these can I actually wash? Which of these do I need to hang dry? There's dynamics of also just like doing laundry well such that you don't damage the clothes, shrink the clothes around also does. So like there's part of me that understands from a business model perspective what you're doing now.
Yeah.
But pitch it in a way where these other value props and these other versions of the world can also exist so that again, an investor especially can go, in my head, I actually prefer a version where I'm not picking the clothesline, or I don't think it's as intimate as a rover. That's super interesting. So you said 38,000 loads?
Yeah, 38,000 loads of laundry.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What's the next big challenge? Because it feels like you're answering my questions. This is logistically hard business, so scale is going to always take time.
Yeah.
But what's the next big challenge in terms of you haven't figured this product portion out, there's a user journey that you keep getting stuck on, or it doesn't work in certain cities? What's the next big challenge?
I mean, the big issue that we're going to run into is 40% of our business is subscription-based, and the deal is trying to get the bigger proportion of people who do a one-off order to transition to the subscription base. And what's the blockage there, right? So you'll have people who will do an order every week, but won't transition to a subscription base. And so like, why aren't we selling that correctly? And I mean, you just told me not to release some of this stuff, but I'm being honest with you, but that's our big thing.
No, I
right?
mean, in
it's
this stage you should be.
Yeah.
And by the way, let me differentiate. You being honest about what's going wrong is a good thing, even with an investor who's bought into your initial vision, because now you're saying, here's the journey I want you to put money against me solving. Yeah. You're going, here's like the experiments we need to run, the problems we need to solve. The stuff that I'm encouraging you not to talk about or talk about differently is stuff that's disagreeable. In other words, it's stuff where I might not yet share your opinion. Yeah. Like you having a challenge, I'm like, great, as a founder, I want to back you as an investor. You going, oh, we only want to have clothesliners that you can pick. We never want it to be a clothesliner we pick for you. That I can fight you on, right? So those things are the things to avoid.
No, that subscription journey is really one of those things that we've been fighting, because once we get people to subscription, they almost never cancel. Like not like they never cancel like Hulu where they just forget. Like they use this thing every single week. And so trying to get people on that jersey is
hypothesis, because I'm thinking about if I was a user, and I think I'm going to be a user after this, it'd be because I'm uncertain as to the cadence. And so maybe, I know this wouldn't be as good for you, but maybe some sort of credit system, and that maybe it's still a subscription, but there's rollover of some kind. So it gives me confidence that I'm not putting money, because I might sometimes want to do laundry myself. I might be in a rush. I have a machine in my apartment. So there's all sorts of dynamics there. Anyway, overall, super interesting product. Let me wrap, from a pitch perspective, I think, do it differently. Again, you're a good storyteller, so you pulled off the version of the pitch you did, but I want something where you get to what you're doing and what's interesting about it and the business model much earlier. And that'll allow someone to join you on all the rest of this, because you're not confusing. You're not a startup that people won't understand after a minute. Everything about you that either an investor, a potential recruit, or a partner will want to think about is like, okay, let's assume that he's caught on to something other folks haven't. What else could go wrong? Let's solve some of that together. So get to that part faster, but super interesting. Thanks for sharing.
No, thank you. And thanks for that feedback. Some of that stuff I've asked people before, mentors, none of them have been like that honest and open. So I pretty appreciate that.
Absolutely. And I'll be a customer. I'll give you more feedback afterwards too.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for sharing.
All right,
John.
thanks.
Anything from the crowd on that one? Any questions as to the pitch or the feedback that I gave? Yeah, Carly, if you want to wait for the mic 1 sec.
So like if he's aiming for non-urban areas, right? Assuming people are in like residential areas that have access to a washer and dryer, then how is the value at that any different from TaskRabbit?
Well, I think the idea of a verticalized marketplace, and this is going to be true not just for his business, for any, it's funny. Like what's coming to mind for me is the conversation happening around AI startups right now. And like the idea of being a GPT wrapper, like being a wrapper around AI. So if you haven't heard this mockery that like people in tech will do, some people will make fun of other startups and say, oh, you're just an AI wrapper or GPT wrapper where all you're doing is you're making a call to OpenAI's APIs, but anyone could use ChatGPT and get the value you claim to provide. And you're just trying to pull one over on people by building an application that's just a wrapper. But I think those products and verticalized marketplaces share the same other truth. I don't think that these things actually should be made fun of. I think people don't realize how much when you get verticalized, the power of your marketing, of your value proposition, of the small edge cases that you begin to solve, let's say a ChatGPT in this case, or a TaskRabbit in the marketplace of a launderer, you begin to solve all the stuff that makes it hard to scale to true mass market adoption. So TaskRabbit is an assemblage of a bunch of different things they'll help you do. But the hypothesis would be, let's say laundry is one thing they might do. If they did maybe they're doing laundry at 80 or 90%. If they could do laundry at 100% in terms of how good it is, how reliable it is, all this other stuff, maybe it's triple the size in terms of potential market. That last 20% or 10% of being a niche product is why an investor would get excited and say, so that's the thing that he would have to prove to me is like, oh, there's stuff left here. And again, the same thing is true of these AI products. Again, that's the analogy coming up for me in my brain is like, oh, there's stuff left here where, yeah, these users could use ChatGPT, but they've got the specific case or the specific integration they want to do, or their change or their need is about the workflow in their life. And so there's enough there that we can expand the market by being that specific. Yeah. Any others?
How do you recommend formatting a pitch?
There's not one format, and the reason there's not one format is it depends on what's hard or what's interesting about what you're building. So for example, for some people, I'll often recommend, if they've got something that the problem is very widely and easily understood, you can start with that and it can be 10 seconds and then you move on and you talk about your solution and your product for the rest of the 50 seconds versus other folks where they're either dealing with a niche problem or the problem's complicated in some way. They might need to spend 30 seconds of a minute, let's say. And again, you can extrapolate this to a deck, just world building and describing to an investor who isn't directly their customer, here's all the things that you don't know are hard about somebody's life that I'm going to solve. So it depends on what's interesting or hard about your business. But in general, what I want out of a pitch every time, the order notwithstanding, is a little bit of world building. So tell me that problem and exactly why it exists. I want solution broad, solutions narrow. Solution broad is here's vision. Here's kind of like what I'm doing, and this will be the same thing I say in 5 years. So it's kind of like mission and overall approach. Narrow is more like the touch and feel. Here's where we're starting today. So I can touch and feel your product as it exists. And this last is the most dynamic. It's here's what's next. And here's what's next truly depends, right? Because if you're pitching me a social company, I want to hear about your go-to-market and how you're going to acquire 1 million users. If you're pitching me a SaaS enterprise solution, I want to hear about your design partners, your initial LOIs, and how that qualitative feedback is going. But the what's next is essentially telling the investor, here's what I want you to sign up for. If you're going to give me money, here's like the journey that's coming next. And that way the investor can decide, okay, if I believe everything else you've said, I'm up for what's next. And that a lot of investors, I think, both investors and founders don't realize this, but the reasons they say no is because they're actually not up for whatever challenge is in the way. They might believe in the problem, they might believe in a solution existing, but they're like, the next experiment you have to do involves a lot of paid ads or involves a B2B go-to-market motion, and I as an investor might not like that journey, and I might not want to embark on it with you.
Cool, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. With that, shall we welcome, do we have next founder up? Awesome. Let's welcome founder number 3 to the stage. How you doing? Good to see you as well. This is a friend of free agencies because Michael launched his book about venture capital at our offices 2 years ago at this point. 3 years ago, 2 years?
We did our New York book launch here.
It was so much fun.
Really fun.
We still have the sign somewhere in the back of the office.
And the other sign is in my mom's house.
Perfect. We got the 2. You have to sign ours.
Exactly.
In case these are valuable one day, and I'm sure they will be, obviously.
Yeah, in case, maybe not. We'll see.
Do you want to tell them what the book's called in case they want to check it out?
Yeah, so the book is called Unlocking Unicorns. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. It's global. And it's focused on the startup stories of Black founders, Latinx founders, female founders outside of the US. So focused on Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. It was a really fun book to write.
And you were in venture capital before. You're now a founder. And I have explicitly avoided, as I learned that you were going to come on the show, learning about your product. So I'm going to hear about what you're building for the first time. So although you're a friend of the show, I am going to be natively reacting. Are you ready to tell everybody what you're building?
I'm excited.
Awesome. Excited, potentially ready. You have a minute. What are you building?
Cool. Well, 15% of the world has a disability of some sort. It can be physical, cognitive, mental. And that group of people, that 15%, has a huge spending power, about $17 trillion. The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990, and it's the reason why buildings have ramps, elevators, and so on and so forth. What we've realized is those same exact rules apply to digital space, websites, mobile apps, and more. And there's a bunch of regulation that's going to require that any company has to make sure their stuff is ADA compliant or usable by people with disabilities. So it unlocks a bunch of spending power in the 17 trillions of dollars. If you look at the dollars today that are lost from lost carts, it's in the billions. From the last calculation we did, about 20 billion is lost in lost carts. And the way that people navigate websites if they're blind or deaf is they use maybe what's called a screen reader, or they have a Braille screen reader, which plugs into a computer and it reads out the website. So essentially what we're building is technology that can scan any website and make sure that
That's
it's
a
ADA
minute.
compliant.
Don't worry. We'll get into it.
There we go.
You want to finish that thought?
No, we scan any website and make it ADA compliant. That's the business.
Super interesting. I'll immediately give this pitch feedback. I like the thing you did of doing the comparison to the world being ADA compliant and saying, well, actually, fun fact, and that's the way I perceive it as like an investor who doesn't know that is, oh, that's a fun fact that there's a digital version of this. Another piece of pitch feedback that we might get into the weeds of this too, but I just want to like say it out loud. I think even in the context of a minute or a deck or an elevator, you got to the cart thing. And in my head, I'm the sort of person, I'm going to already backtrack into like, okay, why does the cart make sense in the rest of what he said? But I think some investors and some readers will not realize what you're saying is, look, not only will websites have to be ADA compliant for this demographic of folks with disabilities, but even if you don't consider the fact they need to be compliant, businesses are losing money because these folks can't properly navigate websites, can't properly transact, and can't properly use their products. I would make that moment where you go, even if we put aside this other thing is also true, make that explicit because it's really powerful. Okay, wait, now let's talk about the how a little bit. So what is the product literally?
Yeah, well, this is great because I think a good pitch leads to more questions.
Yes, exactly.
So how does it work? We have technology that uses AI to scan your website, and based off the source code of your website, we rewrite your website to be ADA compliant. So there's a set of guidelines, 78 rules that we're building, essentially a scanner, a bunch of AI agents that can look at all these rule sets and apply it to any code base. And
an example of this, a trivial example, or a simple example, I should say, not trivial, would be it scans the code base, it notices that all the colors are low contrast.
Exactly. Or another example is you scan the code base and find a bunch of images, all of which don't have captions, or videos that don't have closed captions, right? And these are tools that everyone uses. I think Netflix saw that 60% of their users use captions, even if they don't have a disability. So our hypothesis is making better products for people with disabilities improves every business's bottom line for all users, not just users with disabilities.
How much time do folks, and I assume it's enterprise companies and very large companies right now, how much time do they already spend on this? Are they aware of it? Do they have certain teams that are responsible? Is it only when their legal department complains that they finally, kind of get into gear? Tell us a little about the state of the world.
So we have two substitutes. One substitute is our competitors, who are primarily consulting firms. So they come in, they manually look at your code base. They have a checkboard, literally checklist, pen and paper, and they write out all the problems and give it to you. And this happens once a year, right? At any point within that year, you could be sued. The second major competitor is just lack of caring. 97% of websites on the internet are not compliant today. And so a big part that we're trying to do is, one, educate the market, and then two, be more efficient and 24/7 versus a lot of these other spot check accessibility consultants.
So where does it live from a product perspective? I can imagine it's in, my development cycle, my pipeline, or it could be post-production in a digital sense, not a movie sense. And is it this could be a long-term and short-term question. Is it mostly feeding me recommendations and flags, or is it also, it sounds like solving it in some cases? How is it solving it? Get into the weeds there.
Yep. So we're selling primarily to engineers. So it's within VS Code, which is like the Microsoft Word of engineering. And we also have some GitHub CI/CD or Gitbucket or GitLab or Bitbucket, whatever you use. So we're scanning throughout the whole CI/CD process. I think the best example to think of is security. Whenever you're securing an application, you secure it before it goes into the central repository, while it's in the central repository, and even after you're testing, right? The same thing we think should be happening with accessibility. And
so
that's the
in the code base. So it's in your code editor, your IDE. It's in your deployment pipeline. It's like automated testing. When it's in those moments, then you're going to flag something. It stops.
Something, and we give you the fix.
And you give the fix.
And this is what's unique about what we do versus other players in the space. We're not just giving you an audit report. We think those are so 1990s. We're fixing the issue for you right on the site.
And is that manual or is that AI driven?
AI driven.
Yeah. And is that because most of these fixes are simple that scales?
Exactly. Or really what's true is that a lot of the fixes are repetitive. And so if an engineer is writing a code base and has no idea about accessibility, they're going to do the same wrong errors every single time.
Right.
So why would you pay someone $300 an hour to find those 5,000 issues when you can fix it within 24 hours?
How are you charging?
We charge a subscription.
And that's per seat or per what?
Per site, like per
site.
product.
Cool.
Yeah. So we have 10 customers today. Some of them are Shopify sites. We have some government education. We have some Fortune 1000s. And of course, pricing varies depending on the type of client that you have, but it's all based on the product. So think like the website of a large European airport, right? We're charging per website that they have.
Super fascinating, first of all. We talked a little about, without talking about your product beforehand, that you've also made a decent amount of progress. So you've raised how much?
We raised a seed round, $4 million.
$4 million. Great. And who, if you want to share with the crowd, who participated in that?
I love my investors. I'm always happy to talk about them. We have Urban Innovation Fund. They're based out of California, 2 female GPs. Harlem Capital invests primarily in Black founders. Bain Capital has a Scout Fund, the National Science Foundation, and then a couple other small players like the Kennedy family who helped pass the ADA in 1990.
Yeah, when you shared who you invested in but didn't know why, you and I were talking about how I was like, that's an interesting cap table.
Yeah.
And now I get it. Yeah. Those are people who are kind of bought into this problem.
It's all social impact focused, right? The big bet of our industry is that we're bringing technology to an otherwise underinvested industry. And with all the new regulation that's happening as the industry grows, we'll be the best positioned to benefit from it.
Let me give the counterfactual that exists for every startup. Sure. If I was very pessimistic, I'd say, okay, maybe I believe that websites will need to be compliant, but I think AI code editors, IDEs, cursors of the world, or the co-pilots, the assistants, are going to get sufficiently knowledgeable about solving this problem along the way. And so all the code they generate alongside of their engineers will in the future probably be more compliant or can be more compliant. And some of these fixes are also one-off. They might not be as persistent, or maybe I train my engineer after I reprimand them the first time to not, kind of perpetrate the same mistakes. That'd be the bull case. Talk about how you view that as a founder too, but also, from a pitch perspective.
Yeah, I mean, definitely in the short term, the question is, where is the training data, right? And given that 97% of the internet is not accessible, there is no training data. Like, we're the ones that are building that, right? But in the case that maybe with the 3% of data that they can actually do this, there's a question of, do you have access to the code base to make these changes, right? And that's where we come in as a trusted partner. There's a certain number of issues you can fix with AI and a certain number that you have to always have manual testing because accessibility is so contextual, right? Should this be a brand color or is it just a decorative color, right? That affects whether or not we actually make the change. And those sorts of things require, if we were going to do it with AI, computer vision, but for the most part, humans in the loop today. So we think we'll be best positioned to capitalize on something like what you just described, even if it were to happen.
You made me realize in that moment there's a lot of integration and collaboration with your customer that I think the AI product, for example, that's just, Cursor Cursor wouldn't be the one to solve this, by the way. It'd have to be like a model being used inside Cursor anyway. So that already would be a way to react to what I'm saying. But the other thing I'm realizing is, again, the company having brand colors, choices that they need, to kind of make structured decision tree matrices out of, and basically giving you an understanding. So, and that's where the digital product begins to be imagined by me. I don't know if it exists this way, but suddenly I imagine a digital product where, that engineering team and that product team is logging in and saying, here's the rule set we need, here's all of our brand assets, here's the nice to have, here's what's unique about our customer base. And up until that moment, I hadn't yet actually envisioned the digital part of your product that someone will log into. I imagined a little bit of what it looks like for code diff and, inside development pipelines. And so bringing that imagination a little bit earlier, even in that minute pitch, finding a way to go, here's exactly what it looks, a 10-second version of, customer starts this way, here's what they give us, and here's what we do for them. Yeah. I think will allow someone to imagine it much faster, which then sorts in their head. I wouldn't have been skeptical about this, but I think a lot of people will be skeptical around how one-off solvable this is. Yeah. And they're wrong, right? That's super interesting.
I mean, one, I think you should definitely pitch this.
I'm happy to.
On my behalf, I'd be happy to have you. But I think too, that's huge. And also dashboarding, right? So how do you track all these changes? Right. It's one thing to make the change, but for a lot of accessibility leaders whose budgets are getting cut, the question is, how do I actually justify that this is a valuable thing that we should be investing in?
Can I ask you a spicy question?
Hit me with it.
Will the power players in venture capital and now our government be happy that your product exists? Are you going to be the cause of culture war on tech Twitter This is somewhat a joking question, but in my head, I'm somewhat not joking. We in tech seem to be going into a reversal of caring about DEI, caring about compliance, caring about people with disability, caring about caring. That's my opinion on it. Not putting in those words in your mouth.
Yep.
And you are explicitly a mission-driven, or you have a high social impact and mission component to your business. There's an economic component as well.
Yeah.
But how do you think about the venture environment and the tech environment kind of going backwards on some of this stuff? Or is it not really going backwards when you talk to your customers and they're like, look, yeah, we're not doing DEI as much because no one's nannying us in the same way, but we actually still care about this?
Yeah, I mean, there's three answers from our front. The first answer is no matter who's president, you're going to get sued. So like the Department of Justice is suing schools. Drive-by lawsuits is what it's called when you actually literally drive by a building and sue a building because it has no ramps. That's happening online all the time. We have customers who are getting hit with $80,000 lawsuits. That is bipartisan. Unfortunately, capitalism doesn't care. I think the second thing is there's a big market in Europe, which is passing a lot of regulation. They keep alluding to like, oh, this is going to grow. And that's specifically the European Accessibility Act,
right,
which is going to mandate this for businesses that do 2 million euros or more of revenue. So imagine you're a global business operating in the US and Europe. It just makes sense to make all of your assets compliant. Let's say you don't buy either of those ideas. This actually is quite a bipartisan issue. Right. If you think of like veterans, a lot of whom have disabilities, right, that tends to lean one way, right? Of course, DEIA, if you put accessibility into that, leans another way. But even the ADA, which was passed in 1990, that was during a Bush presidency, the first Bush, right? And every president since then has done something to push accessibility forward. I don't see that as being too much of a headwind. It actually, if anything, will be more of a tailwind for us.
Great answers, and I especially again will highlight, when you can delight an investor or a potential recruiter or whatever, that whole idea of the drive-by lawsuit, and the physical example of a ramp not being there and someone sending a building a lawsuit is like, it also gets you like angry in that moment of going like, oh, this is also just a problem of needing to be compliant with the world because the world might attack you as a business. Whenever you collect resources, there will be people who want to take those resources from you. So that gets the capitalistic brain going too.
Yeah, and there's millions paid out in like settlements and damages, and none of these lawsuits go to court. People always drop them or settle them. And so I think there's a Wall Street Journal article that confirms this. About $300 million in the last 4 years has been paid out as settlements and damages. And we see that growing 10x over the next 5 years.
Michael, great pitch and great journey. Rooting for you on it. It's a great one.
This is so fun. Thank you for having me. Follow TestParty. I don't even think I said the name of the company.
TestParty.
TestParty. Find us on LinkedIn, Facebook. Maybe not really Facebook, but find us on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Good job.
Yeah.
I'm going to let that pass real quick. Jake, do you think we can live with it or no? No? Okay, I won't talk.
I love it. Even better.
Yeah.